Welcome back to the Storytelling Dad. This is where we share stories about fathers, their sacrifices, their quiet pain, and their love that never fades. If these stories touch your heart, please consider subscribing and becoming part of this family. Tonight's story is called, "They Said I Wasn't Smart Enough to Help with Homework, So I Learned All Night." It began on a Tuesday night. The kitchen smelled faintly of dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes. The kind of meal he always made sure his daughter had even when money was tight. At the table, under the yellow glow of the light, his 13-year-old daughter sat hunched over her math book. Fractions, variables, symbols scattered across the page. She chewed on her pencil, frustrated, and finally looked up. "Dad, you don't get this," she said, her voice sharp from exhaustion. "You didn't even go to college." "I'll just ask Mom later." He froze. Her words cut deeper than she knew. He managed a crooked smile, nodded softly, and whispered, "Sure, honey. Ask your mom." But the sting lingered. He felt the ache settle in his chest like a weight. After dinner, when the house was quiet, he returned to the kitchen. The math book lay there like a challenge, daring him. He opened it gently. The numbers blurred at first, like a foreign language he'd never learned. He thought back to his own youth, when he dropped out of school to work. Back then, he traded books for calloused hands, dreams for survival. But tonight, staring at the page, he thought, maybe I can still learn. For her. He dug out his old laptop, the one with keys polished smooth. Slowly, he typed, "How to solve algebra problems." Videos popped up. He clicked one. A young teacher's voice filled the room, explaining equations step by step. He grabbed a battered notebook and started scribbling. His handwriting was messy, his lines crooked, but he pressed on. Midnight passed. His eyes burned. His hand cramped, yet he refused to stop. Page after page, mistake after mistake, until finally, he solved one. Then another. He stared at the answer in disbelief. A smile crept across his face. "I can do this," he whispered. By dawn, the kitchen table was a battlefield. Coffee cups, dull pencils, crumpled papers. The window caught the first blush of light. He heard footsteps. His daughter padded in, still sleepy, her hair tousled. She stopped dead in her tracks. The table was covered in his notes, pages upon pages of equations scrawled in his tired hand. She looked at him, then back at the papers. Her voice was a whisper. "Dad, did you stay up all night?" He didn't answer. He just smiled, weary but proud. For the first time, she saw not a man without a degree, but a father who refused to give up on her. And in that moment, she realized, maybe love wasn't measured in grades or diplomas. Maybe it was in the quiet, relentless work of someone who stayed up all night just to stand by her side. The next evening, he drove her home from school. She scrolled on her phone, earbuds tucked in, humming faintly to a song he didn't recognize. The car was filled with silence between them, the kind that had weight. At a red light, he glanced at her. She looked older than her years, the kind of maturity that comes not from life experience, but from wanting to fit in. He thought about the way her friends carried shiny backpacks, spoke about their parents with titles like lawyer or doctor. He knew what she saw when she looked at him, a man with rough hands, calloused palms. A man who spent his life fixing cars, building shelves, patching walls. Not a man with books and diplomas framed on the wall. "Did you finish your math?" he asked gently. She didn't look up. "Yeah, Mom helped." He nodded, forcing a smile. His chest ached, but he kept his voice calm. "That's good." He remembered the nights when she was younger, how she would climb onto his lap with picture books, demanding stories before bed. She used to say Daddy knows everything. The memory was a warm ache now, like a song he couldn't listen to without tears. Later that night, after she had gone to bed, he stood in the kitchen again. The notebook still lay open on the table. Equations sprawled across its pages like scars of effort. He picked up the pencil and stared at the numbers. "Not smart enough," he whispered to himself. The phrase echoed, bouncing off the kitchen walls. He wanted to shake it off, to remind himself that he had built a life with his hands, that he had provided every meal, every roof, every piece of clothing. But he couldn't shake the truth of her words, at least not the truth she believed in. So, instead of fighting the ache, he sat down. He opened his laptop once more. Another video played. Another voice explained. And again, he scribbled, erasing, rewriting, until the pages filled. Midnight slipped into morning, and still he worked. He wasn't just solving math problems. He was trying to solve the equation of fatherhood, to prove to himself, and someday, to her, that he was enough. Saturday morning brought a quiet house. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, striping the wooden floor. He brewed coffee, the rich scent filling the air, but his mind wasn't on the morning routine. He was still replaying her words in his head. "You didn't even go to college." The mug warmed his palms, but it didn't steady his heart. He sat down at the table, staring at the math notebook filled with his messy scribbles from the night before. Each equation looked like a mountain he had climbed, but the victory felt hollow. What good were numbers if his daughter didn't believe in him? He leaned back and closed his eyes. Memories came uninvited. A little girl wobbling on a pink bicycle, her helmet crooked, her eyes wide with both fear and delight. "Don't let go, Daddy," she had cried. "I've got you," he had said, running alongside until she pedaled steady on her own. He remembered the nights sitting at her tiny desk, helping her spell words out loud. He remembered clumsy science projects, glue sticking to their fingers, cardboard bent in awkward shapes. Her laughter making the failures feel like triumphs. Back then, she never doubted him. Back then, he was the answer to every question. Now, she looked past him, toward a world where degrees and titles meant everything. He sighed and opened the laptop again. Tutorials, formulas, practice sheets. He clicked through them like a man searching for something bigger than answers. He wasn't just solving math anymore. He was trying to rebuild the bridge between them, plank by plank, problem by problem. The pencil moved against the paper again. This time, not with frustration, but with quiet determination. If she couldn't see him as smart enough, maybe she could see him as someone who never stopped trying. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with life. Kids rode bikes, neighbors mowed lawns. Inside, at that small kitchen table, one father kept fighting against numbers, not for himself, but for the girl who once believed he could do anything. Monday evening, she spread her homework across the kitchen table again. Numbers, graphs, and formulas sprawled like a battlefield. He approached cautiously, his hands rough from a long day at work, still carrying the smell of sawdust and oil. "Need some help?" he asked. His voice was gentle, like a man offering a gift he wasn't sure would be accepted. She hesitated, tapping her pencil nervously against the page. "It's fine, Dad. You probably wouldn't get it." The words were not cruel, just honest in the way teenagers often are. But to him, they sliced deeper than she knew. He swallowed, his throat dry. "Maybe I could try?" She sighed and slid the notebook toward him. It was a small act, reluctant, almost dismissive. But to him, it was everything. A chance, a doorway left slightly open. He bent over the problem. His eyes scanned the equations, the symbols marching across the page. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he picked up the pencil. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded, clearly expecting him to stumble. Instead, he began to write, carefully, deliberately. each line of work unfolding from the endless hours he had spent hunched over online tutorials, erasing mistakes, starting again. Her eyebrows rose. He moved step by step, explaining quietly, almost to himself, as if reminding his own heart that he could do this. When he reached the answer, he set the pencil down. His hands trembled, but his eyes met hers with a steady, hopeful look. Silence filled the kitchen. She stared at the page, then at him. Something flickered across her face. Confusion, surprise, maybe even a spark of pride. But she said nothing. She only nodded once, quickly, and pulled the notebook back toward her. "Okay," she murmured, pretending indifference. He smiled faintly, hiding the storm of relief that flooded his chest. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a stranger at her table. That night, when she had gone upstairs, he stayed behind at the kitchen table. His hands rested on the wood, still warm from the lamp above. For the first time, he believed that maybe love wasn't measured in degrees or diplomas. Maybe it was measured in the willingness to try, again and again, until the door opened. The following week, he found himself waiting in the car outside her school. Students spilled out in clusters, laughter echoing down the street. He spotted her among them, walking with two friends. As she climbed into the passenger seat, one of the girls leaned in the window and said with a teasing smile, "Your dad helps with math now? Didn't know he could do that." His daughter blushed. "Yeah, well, he's been trying," she said. Her tone guarded but softer than before. The words were small, almost reluctant, but they hit him harder than any compliment he had received in years. She hadn't dismissed him. She hadn't laughed. She had acknowledged him. On the drive home, the silence between them felt different. Not heavy this time, but tentative, as if a fragile bridge had been rebuilt. Later that night, when she spread her books across the table again, she looked up at him and asked, "Dad, do you know how to do quadratic equations?" His chest tightened, but in the best way possible. He pulled the chair out slowly, sat down beside her, and smiled. "Let's find out together." That night, long after she had gone to bed, he stayed at the kitchen table. The lamp threw a small circle of light over the notebooks, casting long shadows across the room. His hands were tired, his eyes heavy, but he pressed on. The screen of his old laptop glowed with formulas, online lectures, and tutorials. He scribbled notes furiously, crossing things out, starting over. Page after page filled with numbers and diagrams, his handwriting uneven but determined. He wasn't just learning math. He was learning patience, persistence, and the language his daughter now spoke daily in school. With every equation solved, he imagined her face, less disappointment, more pride. By midnight, the table was cluttered with papers, pencils dulled to nubs, and half-empty coffee cups. Still, he pushed on, whispering the steps under his breath, practicing until the process became muscle memory. Finally, as the clock neared 3 in the morning, he leaned back, exhausted but strangely satisfied. The notebook before him was filled, not with perfect answers, but with proof that he had tried. And though no one else saw it, that kitchen table had witnessed a father's vow, that love could be written in numbers too. The next evening, as he sat again at the table, the doubts began to creep in. What if she never saw the effort? What if she never cared? His pencil hovered over the page, trembling slightly. He thought of her words, "Dad, you probably wouldn't get it," and the echo stung like fresh salt in an old wound. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was just fooling himself. The laptop screen glowed back at him, formulas swimming in tired eyes. He rubbed his forehead, exhausted. He considered closing it, packing it away, surrendering to the truth that perhaps he wasn't enough. But then he remembered the mornings he walked her to school with worn shoes. The nights he stayed up fixing her bike. The weekends he worked extra shifts so she could go to summer camp. She had never asked how hard it was. She had only known that he was there. So he picked up the pencil again. His hand shook, but his resolve grew steadier. Even if she never knew the hours behind it, even if she never said thank you, he would not stop. Because sometimes love wasn't about applause, it was about persistence. And so the man who never finished college leaned back over the equations and whispered to himself, "One more try." As autumn deepened, the father's secret hours of study began to shape something more tangible. His notes filled notebooks, his pencils wore down to stubs. And his confidence, though fragile, grew with each solved equation. One evening, as his daughter worked at the table, he quietly slid a small notebook across to her. Its cover was worn, the pages filled with neat steps, highlighted formulas, and even little reminders he had written in the margins. "Don't skip this step," or "check twice before solving." "This is for you," he said softly, almost embarrassed. She opened it, flipping through page after page. At first she frowned, confused. Then her eyes widened as she realized this wasn't a textbook. It was his handwriting, his late-night work, his effort poured into every line. She looked up, caught between words and silence. He didn't wait for her to speak. He simply patted her shoulder and said, "Maybe it'll help when I'm not around." That night, when she went upstairs, she carried the notebook with her. He noticed it wasn't left on the table, and for him, that was enough. Winter came, and with it the holidays. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, though money was tight and the gifts beneath the tree were modest. That morning, his daughter hurried downstairs in her pajamas. She tore through the wrapping paper on a new sweater from her aunt, then a pair of earbuds from her mother. The excitement in her eyes was real, but fleeting. Finally, she reached the package from him. It was small, wrapped clumsily, and her friends might have laughed if they saw it. Inside was nothing store-bought, nothing shiny, just a wooden pencil box, carved by his hands, and tucked inside a fresh notebook with equations he had copied neatly from his nights of study. At first she blinked, puzzled. She flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed. Then she recognized his handwriting. His shaky steps through algebra and geometry, his notes written with her in mind. Her laughter faded into silence. She pressed the box to her chest, and for a moment, she did not speak. He said nothing either. He simply watched, his heart pounding, waiting for her to understand. At first, when she held the wooden box in her lap, her cheeks turned pink. The thought flashed across her mind, what if my friends saw this? They all bragged about new phones, brand-name sneakers, or expensive jewelry. This was just wood and paper. But then she traced her fingers along the carvings. Uneven lines smoothed down with care, initials carved in the corner. She opened the notebook again, flipping through page after page of shaky but persistent handwriting. Each line whispered of long nights, of determination, of love that didn't measure itself in price tags. Slowly, her embarrassment melted into awe. She turned toward him, her eyes softer now, searching his face. He didn't smile big, didn't expect applause. He just sat quietly, his hands folded, waiting. And in that silence, she realized something. This wasn't just a gift. It was proof. Proof that her father had fought against his own limits, against fatigue and doubt. Just to stand beside her in the one place she thought he couldn't, her education. The shame gave way to wonder. The wonder gave way to gratitude. And in that moment, the little wooden box became more precious than any jewel. The days after Christmas carried a quiet shift. His daughter began keeping the wooden box close, slipping it into her backpack instead of leaving it on her desk. But the story didn't end there. One evening, when her best friend visited, She couldn't resist showing the box. At first, her friend laughed at the rough carving. But when she flipped through the notebook, page after page of equations, diagrams, notes written in his tired hand, the laughter faded. Your dad did this for you?" her friend whispered. She nodded, pride beginning to bloom where shame once lived. That night, the friend snapped a photo of the box and notebook, posting it online with the caption, "Not all heroes wear suits. Some just stay up all night for their kids." The post spread faster than either of them expected. Comments poured in. "This is what a real parent looks like. Respect to this man. Money can't buy this kind of love." Thousands of strangers saw what she had once overlooked. For the father, none of it mattered. He didn't even know yet. He just kept living quietly, unaware that the world was beginning to notice the love he had hidden in late-night scribbles. The viral post spread for days, and eventually it found its way back to her. She was scrolling one evening, idly thumbing through videos and memes, when a familiar image caught her eye. It was the wooden box. Her heart skipped. She tapped the post, and there it was, her father's handwriting on full display. The world praising a man she had once dismissed as not smart enough. Her cheeks flushed as she read the comments. Strangers wrote things like, "He's a genius in the ways that matter," and "That girl is lucky to have him." Each word felt like both a gift and a wound. She set her phone down and looked across the room at the box resting on her desk. She picked it up, ran her hands over the uneven carvings, and opened the notebook once more. The scribbles were messy, some equations wrong, some corrected, arrows pointing in every direction. But behind every mark, she could see the hours, the sacrifice, the quiet determination. In that moment, the truth hit her with a force she couldn't ignore. She had been embarrassed once. But now, she was ashamed of herself, not of him. She pressed the notebook against her chest, tears rising in her eyes. For the first time, she whispered into the empty room, "Dad, I didn't know." That night, she couldn't sleep. The glow of the phone screen and the weight of the notebook pressed against her thoughts until she finally got up. She tiptoed down the hall, her heart heavy with regret. Every corner of the house reminded her of him, an old tool on the counter, a chair he had fixed. Even the faint smell of coffee he always left behind in the mornings. She realized, painfully, that his presence had been everywhere, even when she hadn't noticed. When morning came, she found him at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper with tired eyes. She stood there, silent, holding the wooden box. He looked up, surprised, offering her the same gentle smile he always did. For a moment, words failed her. Then the truth spilled out. "Dad, I saw the post. I saw everything. I didn't know what you were doing for me." He didn't say anything right away. He folded the paper, set it aside, and waited. His silence wasn't angry. It was patient, the kind of patience only a parent could carry. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I made you feel like you weren't enough." Her father shook his head softly. "You never made me feel less, sweetheart. I just wanted to make sure you never felt alone." And in that moment, the distance between them began to close, built not on grand gestures, but on the quiet truth finally spoken aloud. That evening, for the first time in weeks, they sat down together at the dinner table. The same table where silence once hurt him now felt different. She placed the wooden box in the center, like it was a centerpiece, a reminder of what mattered. The food was simple, roasted chicken, potatoes, and a small salad, but the air felt heavier with meaning. As they ate, she looked at him again and again, her eyes softer, no longer distant. "Dad," she said quietly, "I don't need perfect grades or expensive things. I just need you here." He nodded, unable to speak at first, his throat tightening with emotions he had buried too long. Hen. Slowly, he smiled and answered, "I was always here, sweetheart. Always." The clinking of forks and spoons carried through the room. But unlike before, the silence between them was no longer painful. It was warm, filled with an unspoken understanding. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he truly belonged at that table again, not as a shadow, not as someone in the background, but as a father, seen and acknowledged. It was late in the evening when she finally stood up from the table, still holding the wooden box against her chest. She walked over to him slowly, her hands trembling, her eyes full of tears she could no longer hide. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I don't deserve your patience, but I need it. I need you." He looked at her for a long moment, then rose from his chair. For all the years of quiet sacrifice, of unspoken hurt, this was the moment that made it worth it. He opened his arms, and she fell into them, sobbing against his chest. His embrace was strong yet gentle, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. He held her like he did when she was small. When monsters in the closet scared her, when scraped knees needed comfort, when the world seemed too big. This time, it wasn't a child seeking comfort. It was a grown daughter finally recognizing the truth. "You were always here," she whispered through her tears, "even when I was too blind to see it." He stroked her hair, eyes closing as relief washed over him. "And I'll always be here. That's what fathers do." In that single embrace, years of silence, pain, and doubt melted away. They didn't need anyone else's approval. They didn't need fancy words. All they needed was this hug, this moment of forgiveness, this recognition of love that never wavered. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt heavy with silence. That night, after their embrace, father and daughter sat together, talking about small things, old memories, favorite meals, dreams that once seemed too far away. On the table, the wooden box remained open, its contents scattered like pieces of their shared history, a ribbon, a crumpled note, a faded photograph. Each item was proof of a love that never asked for titles, never needed recognition, but had always been present. For him, it wasn't about winning her back. It was about letting her see that he never truly left. For her, it wasn't about undoing the past. It was about finally opening her eyes to the love that had been there all along. The world outside might never know the depth of what they shared in that quiet home, but they knew, and that was enough. Because a father's legacy is not measured by how loudly it is celebrated, but by the way it continues, quiet, steady, eternal, in the heart of a child. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to The Storytelling Dad for more tales of love, sacrifice, and family. Wishing you health, peace, and happiness with your loved ones.